The room was too warm for January. Someone had cranked the chandeliers to full, and the heat followed that particular suffocation unique to rooms where everyone is performing something. Evelyn Carter noticed it the moment she was steered away from the main ballroom, through a side corridor she hadn't approved on the floor plan, toward a lounge that didn't appear on any guest map she'd been given. She noticed. She said nothing. She calculated. Outside, the city was cold and white and quiet. Inside the Meridian Grand Hotel, 400 guests drank champagne and did not look for her. No one was coming. She had understood this, truly understood it, bone deep approximately 40 seconds before the man with the sleeping child stepped out of the service corridor and said, in the tone of someone commenting on the weather, "There you are. I've been looking everywhere." He put his free arm around her shoulders. Light. Certain. As though he had done it 1,000 times. "She's my wife," he said to the room, and the room impossibly believed him. The contract had been filed under event support, audiovisual and technical, which was the kind of category that ensured a certain invisibility. Lucas Hayes had driven the equipment van to the Meridian Grand's loading dock at 4 in the afternoon, unloaded 16 crates of amplifiers and wireless relay equipment, argued briefly with a dock supervisor about the freight elevator schedule, won the argument by saying almost nothing, and proceeded to spend the next 3 hours threading cable through the ballroom's subfloor access panels. Lily had come because the sitter had canceled, and because there was no one else. This was the unspoken calculus of his life, no one else. The phrase didn't wound him anymore. It simply defined the shape of things, the edge of the container he lived inside. She was 6 years old and had learned, without being taught, that her job on these evenings was to be small and quiet and to watch. She sat in the equipment staging area, on a folded moving blanket, with a picture book open across her knees, though she rarely looked at it. Mostly, she watched the people who moved through the service corridors, catering staff with trays, security personnel checking credentials, hotel workers pushing linen carts, and she cataloged them with the unnerving attention of a child who has learned that adults are more interesting than they pretend to be. "Bo," she said, when Lucas reappeared from behind a floor panel to check the relay signal. She called him this without thinking the word her mother had used. The only language in their house that had belonged entirely to her. Kept now by Lily, without ceremony, without grief, simply as the shape of the word for father that felt most true. Why don't they look at you?" He glanced up. A hotel manager in a fitted blazer had walked through the staging area without making eye contact, stepping around a cable run with the practiced avoidance of someone who has learned not to acknowledge the infrastructure of their own events. "Because I'm part of the building tonight," Lucas said. "Like the pipes." Lily considered this. Pipes are important. Very important. The building falls apart without them. Exactly right. She returned to her book, apparently satisfied. Lucas returned to the relay calibration, though something in the exchange settled in him like a stone dropped in still water, not grief, not bitterness, something quieter. An accounting. He had chosen this particular form of invisibility 4 years ago, traded one kind of exposure for another, and on most evenings the arithmetic felt sound. He was 38 years old. He had a daughter who noticed things. He had work that was honest and required precision. He had an apartment with 2 bedrooms in a neighborhood where the snow came clean before the plows reached it. These were not small things. The gala upstairs was for Harrington Consolidated, which was the kind of company whose name appeared on the business pages in connection with quarterly earnings reports and regulatory filings and, occasionally, in the technology columns in connection with acquisitions. Lucas knew this because the setup brief had included a company overview, as they always did. And because he had a habit residual, professional, nearly involuntary of absorbing this kind of information without deciding to. He knew, without having been told, that the CEO was a woman. He had inferred this from the seating arrangements requested in the brief, from the particular configuration of the security sweep, and from the fact that the event's private security detail had been quietly doubled in the past 72 hours, without any corresponding change in the public program. He knew this, the way he knew other things, not through effort, but through a kind of trained attention that had never fully switched off. Even after he decided he was done with the work that had required it, he checked his watch. Lily would need to eat something before 7. "Come on," he said. "Let's find you a sandwich." The service corridor that connected the staging area to the hotel's catering kitchen ran behind the ballroom and then turned south, past the VIP elevator bank, past a pair of unmarked meeting rooms, and then past something the hotel's floor plan labeled Executive Lounge Private. As they walked, Lily held his hand. Her grip was not tight. It was the grip of a child who has learned that holding a hand is not about fear, only about connection, about maintaining the thread between herself and the one person who constituted her entire world. She stopped outside the executive lounge. "Bo, I know," he said. Though he hadn't looked yet. He looked. The door was not fully closed. Evelyn Carter had been CEO of Harrington Consolidated for 4 years and 11 months, which meant she was approximately 1 month away from the anniversary that would trigger the accelerated vesting of her remaining equity. She was aware that certain members of her board were aware of this as well. She was aware that this awareness informed the timing of certain recent events. She was not paranoid. Paranoia implies irrationality. What she had was pattern recognition sharpened by necessity. And the pattern she had been observing for the past 3 weeks was quite clear. It began with the CFO, Victor Hale. Victor was 53, silver-haired, possessed of the particular brand of warmth that is entirely a performance, and therefore indistinguishable from the real thing, unless you have learned, as Evelyn had learned, to watch for what people do not say. He had been at Harrington for 9 years, had survived 3 prior CEOs, and had the specific patience of a man who understood institutional inertia and knew how to use it. He had begun, 6 weeks ago, rerouting certain financial disclosures through a subsidiary filing structure that reduced their visibility in the quarterly aggregates. This was not strictly illegal. It was the kind of thing that was designed to look, under any subsequent review, like a routine administrative optimization. Evelyn had noticed on day 4. She had said nothing. She had begun documenting. 3 weeks ago, her personal vetting file for her head of security had been accessed from a terminal she didn't recognize. Last week, 2 members of her security detail had been reassigned. The reassignment came through HR, routine on paper, impossible to contest, without appearing paranoid, and replaced with individuals she had not personally cleared. Tonight, the night of the Harrington Annual Gala, her revised itinerary had included a VIP reception in the executive lounge that had not been on any version of the program she had approved. She had attended anyway. To refuse would have been to show her hand. She was wearing midnight blue, which was not a coincidence. It was the color of controlled authority, of someone who had chosen their ground. Her hair was up. Her heels were low enough to run in, if necessary. This was also not a coincidence. Victor arrived 4 minutes after she did, which told her the timing had been planned. He brought 2 men she didn't recognize, not hotel staff, not Harrington employees, dressed in the particular way of men who want to appear neutral and don't quite manage it. "Evelyn," he said. Warm. Easy. As though this were a pleasant coincidence. "I'm glad we have a moment. There's something I've been wanting to discuss with you about the Meridian acquisition." The Meridian acquisition was not, in fact, the subject. She understood this. The subject was a document he removed from his jacket, a transfer of proxy authorization, effectively a mechanism for temporarily suspending certain of her executive authorities during what the document described as a governance review period. "I'd strongly encourage you to review this tonight," he said. "The board has concerns." "About what specifically?" "About several things." He smiled. "I think you'll find it's better addressed privately. Here, rather than in tomorrow's session." This was the bait. The document, if signed under these circumstances, would not hold legal weight. She had enough corporate counsel in her contacts to be certain of this, but its existence, its timing, the fact of her signature on it, could be weaponized, could be used to construct a narrative of instability, of capitulation, of a CEO who had, under pressure, voluntarily stepped back from her own authority. The camera in the upper left corner of the room had, she noted, developed a blinking red indicator light that meant it had lost signal. The camera in the corridor outside had, she also noted, a piece of gaffer tape across its lens that had not been there when she entered. "I'll need my counsel present," she said. Her voice was perfectly level. "Of course," Victor said. But tonight, given the sovert, the door opened. Lucas had made the assessment in approximately 4 seconds. The woman in midnight blue, standing with her weight shifted to her left. Not relaxed. Braced. Arms loose but hands slightly cupped. Fingertips oriented down, which was the posture of someone consciously preventing themselves from reaching for a phone. Face absolutely composed in the way that faces become absolutely composed when composure is the only available defense. The man facing her, positioned to block the primary exit. 2 others arranged casually at the room's perimeter, in a configuration that was not casual at all. The cameras, dark. Lucas stepped through the door. He had Lily on his left side, her hand in his. He had a canvas equipment bag on his right shoulder, which was true, and a reason to be in the building, which was also true. He did not know this woman. He did not know what, precisely, was being done to her. He knew the architecture of the situation, the way he knew other things by reading the room, the bodies, the mathematics of space and power. "There you are," he said. "I've been looking everywhere." His voice was unhurried. He crossed the room toward her, not quickly, not hesitantly, at the pace of someone who belongs in a space, and put his arm around her shoulders. He felt her stiffen for a fraction of a second, then still. She was fast. He respected that. "She's my wife," he said, turning to address Victor with the mild irritation of a man who has arrived at a party to find his spouse has been buttonholed by a bore. "Sorry, is this a private meeting?" "No one told me." Victor's expression did not change in any way that would be legible to most people. Lucas watched the tiny recalibration, the fraction of a second in which the man computed the variables of this new presence. This unknown quantity. This witness. "Not at all," Victor said, after a beat that was 1 beat too long. "We were just catching up." "Wonderful." Lucas looked at Evelyn. "Lily was asking for you. You mind?" He said it with the ease of a man making a domestic request. "Come say good night." A request that was entirely reasonable and entirely impossible to refuse without making the refusal conspicuous. "Of course," she said. Her voice was as composed as her face. Only her hand, which found his forearm as she turned, communicated anything at all, and what it communicated was not gratitude, exactly, but recognition. She was telling him she understood what he was doing. He accepted the signal and walked her out of the room. Lily, who had been standing in the doorway, reached up and took Evelyn's hand without being asked. She did this with the naturalness of a child who has decided, on some private basis, that this was appropriate. Evelyn looked down at the small hand in hers and said nothing. They moved through the corridor at a measured pace, not running. Running would communicate the wrong thing to anyone watching. "Don't speak until we're past the elevator bank," Lucas said quietly. She didn't. They emerged through the service exit onto a side street, where the hotel's delivery vehicles were parked in a line, and the snow had collected on the rooftops in a way that made the city look briefly peaceful. The cold was immediate and clean. "You have a car?" Lucas asked. "My driver is in the front motor court. Don't use it. They'll have eyes on the front entrance." He thought for a moment. "There's a cab rank on Ellison Street. 2 blocks east. Use cash. Don't call your regular contacts tonight. Change your route to wherever you're sleeping." She looked at him. He had the impression, and it was only an impression, that she was not accustomed to being given instructions, and that she was currently evaluating whether to be offended by them. "Your security team," she said. "Were they?" "Not my security team. I deliver audiovisual equipment." He shifted Lily slightly. The child had gone sleepy against his shoulder, the way she did when the evening ran long. "But I've worked in environments where I learned what a compromised perimeter looks like." A pause. "The cameras," she said. "Yes." "The positioning of the..." "Yes." Another pause. She was cataloging what she had observed, and matching it against what he evidently had, and arriving at the same destination from a different direction. He watched this happen and didn't interrupt it. "The document he wanted me to sign," she said. "Don't sign anything tonight." I was aware of that. I know you were. He adjusted his grip on Lily, who had fully succumbed to sleep now. Her face pressed warm against the side of his neck. Evelyn watched this. He didn't look at her while she did it, but he was aware of her gaze in the way he was aware of most things peripherally, without making it a subject. Who are you? She asked. Nobody important. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have tonight. She was quiet for a moment. The snow fell in thin, indifferent curtains. Somewhere behind them the hotel was warm and full of people performing their various functions. And Victor Hale was, presumably, recalibrating. You should go, Lucas said. The cab rang. She went. He watched her walk to the corner, not because he was concerned about her direction, but because, and this was harder to account for, he wanted to be certain she made the turn. When she did, he looked down at his sleeping daughter, and then up at the sky, which was the color of old pewter, and did the small internal arithmetic of whether he had done something stupid. He had done something that could not be undone. He had inserted himself into a situation he did not understand, on behalf of a woman he did not know, in a building where he had been invisible right up until the moment he chose to stop being invisible. He decided he could live with it. Come on, he murmured into Lily's hair. Let's get you home. The cars arrived at 7:43. Lucas was making oatmeal when he heard the sound, not loud, but layered, the particular overlay of multiple engines decelerating together, and he put the spoon down and went to the window. 3 black SUVs. Not police, not government, something private and deliberate. He was back at the stove when the knock came. He finished serving Lily's oatmeal, set it in front of her with a small ceramic dish of raisins arranged on the side because she preferred them separate, and then went to the door. Evelyn Carter stood on his porch. She was wearing dark trousers and a coat he suspected cost more than his monthly rent. But the coat was not the thing he noticed first. He noticed that she was standing without the posture of someone who expects to be accommodated. The posture of last night, composed, armored, performing control, was present but altered. She was still contained, but she had removed a layer of it. She looked, in other words, like a person. You found me quickly, he said. I have resources. I know. She looked at him steadily. You said I was your wife. You needed to not be alone in that room. It was the fastest available solution. Yes. A pause. I want to make it true. He was quiet. Not she stopped. Started again with the slight adjustment of someone choosing words with unusual care. Not in the romantic sense. Not immediately. I mean a legal arrangement. A contract. Why? Because Victor's next move will be to construct a narrative about my personal instability. My isolation. A CEO with no anchor, no family, no one who would notice if the board made certain structural changes. She said it the way she might present data flatly, without inflection. A husband changes that calculus, particularly one who is not part of my existing network, someone outside the system who cannot be leveraged. Lucas leaned against the doorframe. Behind him, he could hear Lily eating. The small sounds of ceramic and spoon. You're describing a shield, he said. Yes. Using me. Using both of us. I would compensate you. The arrangement would have clear terms. Clear end conditions. Nothing that would affect your daughter. Something moved in his expression. She saw it. He saw that she saw it, and he let it be visible rather than composing it away. Come back tomorrow, he said, and bring the terms in writing. She came back. But before she did, he looked. He had a friend from a previous life, a man named Graham Whitfield, who now ran a small private consulting firm in Boston, and who owed Lucas several favors of the sort that don't expire. And he asked Graham to pull what was findable on Evelyn Carter and on Harrington Consolidated's current board structure, and on Victor Hale specifically. Graham called back in 2 hours. Your woman's clean, he said. Which meant no outstanding criminal exposure, no known intelligence connections, no pattern of using people badly. She's actually between you and me quite remarkable. Built that company from a mid-tier regional firm into something real. The board situation is a power play by the old guard. Hale's been positioning for 18 months. What does he want? The company, ultimately. but he can't have it outright. So he'll settle for her removal and a successor he controls. Is there a personal component? A pause. You mean, did she do something to him specifically? Not that I can find. He's a man who wants to run things and found a woman in his way. That's most of it. Lucas thanked him and ended the call. He sat for a moment at his kitchen table, which was the same table he had bought when he and his wife had first moved into the apartment 6 years ago. His wife, whose name had been Clara, who had died on a Tuesday afternoon in March when a pickup truck ran a red light on Fenwick Avenue, who had been carrying Lily's dry cleaning and a library book and 2 coffees, one for herself and one for Lucas, who had been supposed to meet her for lunch that day but had gotten a call and had canceled. He didn't think about this constantly. He had done the work, the actual unglamorous work of learning to carry it, but certain moments had a weight that was not grief exactly, only a kind of density. A reminder of how completely everything had restructured itself around a single absence. He thought about what Evelyn had said. Someone who would notice. He thought about Lily drawing at the kitchen table, drawing everything in threes, always 3 figures, even when she drew abstract shapes, even when she drew animals. She had been doing it for 2 years and had never mentioned it. He picked up the phone and called Graham back. The CFO's financials, he said. Can you find the layer under the layer? Give me 48 hours. Thank you. He started making dinner. He put 3 plates on the shelf instead of 2, and then stood there, looking at the 3rd plate for a long moment, and then put it back. Not yet. The contract was 12 pages, which was fewer than he expected and more careful than he had expected. No coercive language, no penalty clauses that would bind him disproportionately, an exit provision with 90-day notice, a separate clause, which she had apparently added herself rather than leaving to counsel, specifying that no arrangement entered into under the agreement would require his daughter's participation or presence in any public capacity without his explicit written consent. He read it twice. He noted the clauses she had flagged for negotiation and the ones she had not. The ones she had not flagged were the ones that protected him. The ones she offered to negotiate were the ones that protected her. This told him something. The exit provision, he said. If I invoke it, what's the story? Irreconcilable differences. Amicable. No press conference. No detail. You retain the compensation already paid. And Lily, she is mentioned nowhere in any external communication, ever. This is non-negotiable on my end, not yours. I won't allow her to be part of this. He looked up from the document. She was sitting across his kitchen table, which was a strange thing. Evelyn Carter, CEO of Harrington Consolidated, sitting in his slightly uneven kitchen chair with her hands folded on a table that had a water stain in the shape of a rough circle near the left edge. She was not performing discomfort. She was not performing ease. She was simply sitting there, which he found more readable than most things. Why? He asked. Specifically, why you? She understood the question. Because your instinct was to protect someone you didn't know, because you made a calculation in 4 seconds that most people wouldn't make in 4 minutes, because you didn't stay to be thanked. A pause. And because you're not afraid of me. Should I be? Most people are. Most people are afraid of what they don't control, he said. I stopped trying to control most things a while ago. She looked at him for a moment that was slightly longer than a conversational pause. The arrangement begins Monday, she said. He signed the contract. That night, Lily drew 3 figures at the kitchen table. She labeled them in her careful, slightly uneven handwriting. Beau. Me. Eve. He found it the next morning after she had gone to school. He set it on the refrigerator without saying anything about it to anyone. They lived in parallel for 3 weeks before the parallels began, in small ways, to cross. His presence in her world was the arrangement. The events, the appearances, the board dinners where he sat beside her and said precise, considered things when asked, and nothing when not asked, and where he was gradually understood by the people around Evelyn to be the sort of person who did not explain himself, and therefore could not be easily catalogued. This made him, paradoxically, more threatening to certain people than a man who talked. Victor Hale shook his hand at the first board dinner, and smiled and said nothing with his eyes that his mouth wasn't saying. And Lucas returned both the handshake and the smile with the same quality of blankness. Evelyn noted this. He saw that she noted it. Her world, in his apartment on the evenings when the arrangement required him to be present at her side. Quieter than he expected. She arrived without an entourage. She sat in the kitchen and drank tea and occasionally reviewed documents on a tablet, and sometimes did not review documents at all, and simply sat. Lily treated her with the considered courtesy of a child who has decided to reserve judgment, not unfriendly, not warm, measuring. Then, one Tuesday, Evelyn arrived early, and Lily was at the kitchen table with a math worksheet she was struggling with, not the arithmetic, which she found easy, but the word problems, which required her to build the picture of a situation before she could solve it. "The train leaves from Station A," Evelyn said, sitting down across from her. She hadn't asked. She had simply looked at the worksheet and spoken. "Don't start with the answer. Start with what you can see." Lily looked at her. "What's in the problem?" Evelyn said. "Name the things." "A train," Lily said slowly. "And Station A, and Station B. And 60 miles. And time." "Good. What are the relationships between the things?" "The train connects A to B. The 60 miles is the distance, and time is what the problem wants." "So I need speed," Lily said. "What do you have?" "Distance and..." She stopped. Looked at the problem again. "And it says the train is going at 40 miles per hour. Then you have everything." Lily worked the problem. She got it right. She looked up at Evelyn with an expression that was not gratitude, exactly more like assessment. "You're good at this," Lily said. "I solve problems for a living. Is that what Beau does too?" A small pause. "In a way," Evelyn said. That night, after Lily was asleep, Lucas poured 2 glasses of water, not wine. He didn't drink. And she had never asked why, and they sat at the table and he told her what Graham had found. The financial layer under Victor's layer. A series of transactions routed through a holding company registered in Delaware, which then connected to an acquisition vehicle that had quietly accumulated a 6% stake in Harrington's secondary class shares over a period of 14 months. Not enough to force action, enough to matter in a vote, enough to move the balance of a board decision that was close. "He's been preparing for a close board vote," Evelyn said. Her voice was level, but he heard something shift behind it. "That means he has commitments. He has the votes lined up. He's just waiting for the moment." "The annual governance review," Lucas said. "Thursday week." "Yes." She was quiet for a moment. He watched her run the arithmetic, not panicked, not distressed, the clean, fast computation of someone who has been doing this kind of work for a long time. "I need the documentation," she said. "I can have it by Monday." She looked at him. "How?" "The same way I know where to run cables through a subfloor. You learn the building." Something crossed her face that was not quite a smile, and not quite the absence of one. An acknowledgement, he thought, that was harder for her to offer than she made it appear. "Lucas," she said. Thank you." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "Don't thank me yet." But he didn't move away from the table, and neither did she. And the kitchen was warm and the snow was coming down outside and upstairs. Lily was sleeping in the room where she had always slept, and the 3rd plate had been on the shelf for 5 days now, without going back. The boardroom of Harrington Consolidated occupied the 42nd floor of the Harrington Tower, which was the kind of room designed to communicate, through its dimensions and its materials and its view, that decisions made inside it were of a consequence that matched the altitude. The table seated 22. There were 14 board members present, plus counsel, plus Evelyn. Victor arrived 3 minutes late, which was a signal. Punctuality is power. Lateness, used correctly, is also power. He had 4 commitments. Lucas had spent Monday counting them not by contacting them, but by reading the decision tree, understanding the pressures, the relationships, the financial entanglements that would make a vote feel inevitable to each one. 4 was enough for a majority. if 2 other swing votes could be moved. Lucas was not, technically, supposed to be in this room. He was there anyway. He had come with the audiovisual equipment for the presentation. This was, again, the kind of invisibility that a certain category of worker could still deploy inside a certain category of building, and he had set up the display system 30 minutes before the meeting began, and he had remained because no one had asked him to leave, and because he had learned, in a previous life, that the best position from which to change the outcome of something is the position that no one is watching. He stood near the presentation system at the room's east end. Victor opened with a recitation of the governance review process, procedurally correct, practiced. The kind of presentation that had been rehearsed until it sounded unrehearsed. He was good at this. Lucas gave him that. The document was introduced. A proposal to institute a transitional co-governance structure, which was language meaning, remove authority from Evelyn, while appearing not to remove it. Evelyn listened. She made no visible response. Lucas had watched her practice this the night before, not the content. She didn't need to practice the content. But the stillness, the specific quality of stillness that communicates not vulnerability but patience, and that patience is a form of certainty, Victor said. Given the board's concerns about strategic alignment going forward, we believe this structure. I have something to present, Lucas said. The room turned. Victor's expression did something small and quick, and then composed itself. This is a closed meeting. I'm part of the audiovisual support. Lucas picked up a drive from the equipment case. And I have a presentation that's relevant to item 4 on the agenda. Item 4 was, in the agenda Victor had distributed, listed as Financial Oversight Review. It was meant to be his vehicle, the mechanism through which he introduced the proxy transfer documentation that would give his holding structure certain rights of review. Lucas connected the drive. What appeared on the screen was not a slide deck. It was a sequence of documents, transaction logs, filing timestamps, correspondence chains, assembled with the specific logic of someone who knows how to build a case from evidence rather than narrative. He walked through it in 9 minutes. He did not editorialize. He did not characterize Victor or his intentions. He presented the log of transactions, the Delaware Holding Company's registration, the share accumulation timeline, the correspondence that connected each stage, and this was Graham's contribution, and it was the piece that mattered most, a chain of emails between Victor and one of the 4 committed board members discussing the timing of the governance vote in relation to Evelyn's vesting anniversary, not the vote itself, the timing of the vote. In relation to the anniversary, the room was very quiet. Victor was the kind of man who could recover from almost anything. Lucas had expected this and watched it happen, the small internal gathering, the recalibration, the preparation to contest the provenance of the documents, to question the chain of custody, to cast doubt. The documents were obtained legally, Lucas said, before Victor could begin. He looked at the board counsel, not at Victor. Full provenance is attached as Appendix C. Graham, Whitfield and Associates prepared the authentication report. Graham's firm had a reputation that made challenging the report a poor strategic choice. Victor said nothing. The swing votes swung. It took another 3 weeks. Victor resigned. The governance proposal was withdrawn. The Delaware holding structure was referred to the relevant regulatory bodies for review. The 4 committed board members recused themselves from the subsequent governance vote, which passed without them. Evelyn called Lucas on a Wednesday evening and said, in the direct way she said most things, "It's over. The arrangement can be dissolved whenever you want. The exit provision is yours to invoke." He said, "I know." She said, "I wanted to give you that." He said, "I know." A pause that was slightly longer than necessary. "How is Lily?" she asked. She got 100 on her math test. The word problems? Word problems, yes. Another pause. "Good," Evelyn said. She hung up. He stood in the kitchen for a while. He was making dinner pasta, which was one of Lily's 2 approved dinners for weeknights, and the water was almost boiling. He finished making dinner. He called Lily down from her room. He served 2 plates. He stood at the shelf for a moment. He set out the 3rd plate. She appeared at his door on a Saturday morning. which was different from before she had arrived with the black SUVs and the weight of a situation. And this time she arrived alone, on foot, her coat dusted with snow, and she was carrying nothing. He opened the door before she knocked. She looked at him. "The contract is dissolved." "I know. I filed the paperwork Thursday." "I know." She was quiet for a moment. "I'm not here about the contract." He stepped back from the door. Not to invite her in, and not to block her out, simply to make space. To leave the decision as hers. She stepped inside. Lily came down the stairs in her Saturday socks, her hair still disordered from sleep, and stopped on the third step and looked at Evelyn for a moment with the assessing gaze she reserved for things that required decision. "Are you staying for breakfast?" Lily asked. Evelyn looked at Lucas. He looked back without answering. "I don't know," Evelyn said, which was the most honest thing she could have said. And Lily apparently recognized this because she came down the remaining 3 steps and went to the kitchen to get a third plate. They listened to the small sounds of a child preparing for company, the careful removal of a plate from the cabinet, the opening of the silverware drawer, and they stood in the hallway, not speaking because there wasn't, at that moment, anything that needed to be said. Lucas had told a lie on a January evening in a hotel he didn't belong in. The lie had been 4 words. He didn't know. Standing in his hallway with the smell of coffee coming from the kitchen and the snow still falling outside, and whether he was interested in making those 4 words true. He knew that he was not interested in making them not true. "Coffee's ready," Lily called. Evelyn moved first. He followed. They sat down at the kitchen table, which had the old water stain near the left edge, and which seated 3 without crowding, and Lily served the coffee with the elaborate gravity of a 6-year-old who has decided that this is her responsibility. And outside the window the snow came down clean, and the city was quiet the way it is quiet only on certain mornings when no one has gotten to it yet. Lucas poured. Evelyn held her cup with both hands. The chair beside her was not empty. The drawing was still on the refrigerator. No one had said anything large. No one would. This was not, it turned out, a story about a declaration. It was a story about the specific warmth of a kitchen on a winter morning, and a table with 3 places set, and the slightly ridiculous miracle of choosing without contract, without performance, without the elaborate machinery of certainty, to simply be in the same room with another person and let that be the thing. Lily looked at them both across the table. "Same time tomorrow?" she asked. Evelyn didn't look at Lucas. Lucas didn't look at Evelyn. "Yeah," he said. "Same time tomorrow."